Hi, this is Dorie Clark. I am here with Gabrielle Korn, and it is so excited to be here with her. And she is the author of Everybody Else is Perfect. She is currently working for Netflix. She is the former editor of Nylon Magazine, a former high-ranking staffer at Refinery 29. Gabrielle, so great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you.
Wonderful. We are going to be talking today about a lot of things. Gabrielle has a lot of experiences to share. One of the things that we're going to be talking about that I think is especially relevant to people in the workforce, particularly in some cases women, especially people who have been successful very young, is a question of imposter syndrome at work and how we can overcome it. So thank you all who are tuning in live. We're so glad to have you here. Please feel free to type into the chat box and let us know who you are so we can say hello and give a shout out and take your comments. So Gabrielle, the first question that I have for you now, obviously your memoir that you wrote kind of problematizes the experience, you could say, of rising successfully and so fast in the fashion industry and in women's media. But let's for a moment start with a positive. You became editor-in-chief of Nylon Magazine, which is a prominent culture and fashion magazine, at age 29. So I'm curious, what was it, and perhaps you can talk a little bit about this, that enabled you to rise so fast? And what advice would you have for other people who are perhaps young professionals that are looking to make a similar meteoric rise early on?
I think it was a combination of things. I mean, unfortunately, it's hard to give advice about it because a lot of it really was right place, right time. Like, I was a digital editor when print layoffs were happening, so I survived that round of layoffs. And I was also just always really thirsty and like always taking on more and more, and making sure that I was like not disposable, I think was like the most important thing that I did. Like, was I became the digital director, and then I became editor in chief, and the digital presence under me was just so successful that it was like, when the magazine folded in 2017 and I became EIC, it made a lot of sense to turn it into a digital brand based on the success of the digital platforms. And to do that, I kind of did what I knew how to do best, which was grow audiences and be really voicey and have a point of view. So it's hard to like pinpoint one thing that I did. It was like, I think I got really lucky in a lot of ways. Like, I had a digital skill set at a time when media finally started paying attention to the internet. And I also think that I wanted it really badly.
That makes perfect sense. And I think it's always a good thing for people who are looking to advance, and especially younger professionals, to be thinking about how to get out ahead on the skill sets that are going to be most relevant over the next 5 to 10 years. So it sounds like you really had that advantage. Now, one of the things that, of course, oftentimes happens to professionals who rise quickly is, we hear about this a lot in the business world, and many books have been written about it. Yours is not directly about this, but I feel like one of the themes that gets talked about in your book is sometimes the disjunct that comes from having a lot of success early on, and perhaps a feeling of imposter syndrome, and not really knowing necessarily quite how to fit in those places. How do you think about, or how would you advise other people around the topic of feeling imposter syndrome, or for people who are successful but may look around and worry that they'll be found out, or just dealing with that level of success?
I think that, a few things. One is that there's a difference between imposter syndrome and being an imposter. And I feel like something that I would say to my junior staff who came to me and said that they were feeling impostery, I would just be like, well, are you an imposter? Did you literally lie your way into this job? And if you didn't, then like, these are feelings, not facts. But I also think that it's important to not always think about those feelings as bad things, because if we can harness feelings of imposter syndrome and turn it into motivation, I think then it becomes a really positive thing. And that was something I did, which was like, I felt like I had to prove myself. And I kind of felt like an imposter because in a lot of ways I was an imposter. Like I was decades younger than people who had the same title as me and were doing the same work. So I had to prove that I deserved my title even after I got it. And I think that also speaks to the fact that like imposter syndrome doesn't happen in a vacuum. Like there we all have context. And so it's like what you bring to the table, but also like how you are treated by your peers and by your managers and by the industry that you work in. And for me, I was treated like I didn't belong. And I was treated like I was too young to get the things that I wanted, but I was still being made to do the work. So I think all of that came together to make me feel really self-conscious about it and really like paranoid and just like I just felt like I had so much to prove all the time, and ultimately that made me want to prove everyone wrong, and it made me want to do the best job I could possibly do so that people wouldn't bring my age up anymore, so that it would be like, oh, you have this job because you know how to do it.
Yeah, I think that's really useful and powerful advice. The distinction, especially between imposter syndrome of, perhaps feeling like an imposter at times, which almost everyone experiences, and recognizing that you're not actually an imposter, that you have earned your way to being there and to having a place at the table. So I am curious. One of the things, Gabrielle, that I was really struck by is you talked about the fact that when you were the head of Nylon, this is obviously an opportunity where many magazine editors have the chance to become the public face of the brand, to really step out and get known. And you talked a lot about your desire to help other people shine and to really share the spotlight with other people. But you also have noted that in some ways there's a little bit of a tension because it perhaps wasn't the best thing for your career and your brand, but nonetheless wanting to do that. For leaders who are concerned about these questions of, how do you build your brand and also how do you shine a light on others? Can you talk a little bit about that and how you might navigate that tension as an enlightened leader?
I think there's really no right answer to this, but for me, I did a lot of brand facing up until I became editor in chief, because so much of it had to do with like being able to climb the ladder and being visible in the industry so that I had opportunities. And especially in an industry like media, where it's like it very much becomes a cult of personalities, it is important that people know who you are and that they associate the work of your publication with you. But once I became editor in chief, I just had this feeling like there had to be a greater purpose to me having this job than becoming known myself. And as a white woman in media, I really just felt like it wasn't ethical anymore to take up space like that. So I, as much as I could, had people on my staff do on-camera opportunities, and be the ones at events, be the ones hosting videos and doing interviews. And I feel like that was so much more valuable for our readers, because if you can associate a brand with a diverse group of people rather than with one person, I think it's just such a more rewarding experience of media to consume, because the chances that you'll see yourself reflected is so much greater.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective. That's great. And one of our viewers, Kimberly, is chiming in. She said she's felt this way on the other end, rather than being sort of diminished in some way, or worried about perceptions about being younger, that she might be thought of as old and set in her ways. However, I do not follow that label. Amen to that, Kimberly. That's awesome. And we have great folks tuning in. We have Katie coming in here. Catherine is here. Theodore is joining us. And I'll just say also, I believe there might have been a little bit of an issue with the feed. And so if you are here tuning in, please feel free to type into the comment box. I did not get the early comments. So say hi. Tell us where you're chiming in from. We would love to say hi to you, and also to take your questions for Gabrielle, who is the author of the amazing new book out just on Tuesday, Everybody Else is Perfect. So that's fantastic. So something that I'm especially interested in, Gabrielle, is you actually spend some time in your book talking about salary, which is kind of a taboo topic in a lot of circles in the corporate world. But you are an advocate of salary transparency. Can you talk a little bit more about what form that takes and why that is important to you?
Totally. But I have to first say, I love that I can see your cat behind you. I'm so happy about that.
Thank you. He's happy too. He's definitely looking to expand his brand through Newsweek's Better platform.
I can see that. So in terms of talking about money, I was so nervous to do this because it is so taboo, but how nervous I was to do it made me feel like that was why I had to talk about it. I think that there's this culture of silence around money, especially for women. And I think that it was really created to keep us from asking for what we deserve. And it's actually illegal to discourage employees from disclosing salaries to each other. And HR departments won't tell you that because HR departments aren't there for you. They're there to protect the company. And the times in my life when my peers have disclosed their salaries to me were like just the best examples of allyship that I've ever experienced. Like there was one time when one of my colleagues was leaving, and he worked not like directly under me, but he was below me for sure. And I said, do you mind, since you're leaving, telling me how much money they're paying you? And he was like, of course. And it was $15,000 more than I was making. And before that, I had been like really gridlocked in conversations about raises. And that gave me actual evidence and ammunition and like an actual data point to be like, hey, like, I know you're underpaying me because you're paying this man this thing. And I just think that like if everyone could do that, things would be so much more equal and more fair. And I also noticed a lot when I was a hiring manager that women just don't know what to ask for. They have no idea how much they're worth. They either come in at double what I have or half what I have to pay them. And something that I started doing was just deciding that like I was going to pay people the number that I had in mind for them, even if they asked for much less, because like I needed them to come in knowing that I wanted to pay them what they're worth and not come in feeling already resentful about being underpaid. And that made such a difference in the work culture. And I mean, I wanted to write about it in the book also because I couldn't talk about the different jobs I had without talking about how much I was being paid at all of them, because I mean, how much you're paid informs everything. It informs like how you live, how you can take care of yourself, like how you feel if you have anxiety about money while you're doing the job. And I didn't want it to be separate because it's not separate.
Yeah, that's so enlightening. I appreciate that, Gabrielle. And in fact, for folks who want to go deeper on the question of salary, my friend David Burkus, who is the author of a new book about the virtual workplace, David was actually a guest on the Newsweek Better show just a few weeks ago. He has a very popular TED Talk that has been seen more than 1 million times about why it is important to share information about your salary. You can look that up. His name is David Burkus. And also, we have a previous episode of Better with a gentleman named Ezra Singer, and Ezra is a salary negotiation expert. You can tune into the Newsweek Better archives to get access to that episode with information about strategies on negotiating your salary. So thank you for that, Gabrielle. We also have some wonderful friends who have been tuning in to join us. We want to make sure to say hi to Mary from St. Petersburg. Rosinda is here. Romy from Chicago. Gina is also in Florida. Veronica from New Jersey. Yeah, we have some great folks here. Kimberly wants to know, is the cat real or an imposter? The cat is in fact real. So glad to clarify that and get that out of the way. So Gina actually had an interesting question, which is a long one, but I'll put it up here. Thank you for this, Gina. She wants to know, in short, Gabrielle, so you don't have to read all of it. I'll summarize. She says that she is taken with your distinction between the sort of factual external factors about how other people are treating you versus your internal feelings. And she's wondering, maybe you should be essentially creating separate strategies to deal with both of those pieces. And do you agree with that idea?
Yeah, completely. And I think the external factors are oftentimes a management problem. I think like managers can sometimes create atmospheres where people don't feel comfortable asking questions and asking for the help they need. And I think that can make people feel like they have no idea what they're doing and they have no support. So I think it's a lot of times a top-down problem. I think there's also the issue of people hiring, especially young people, for their potential versus for their track records. And I think that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on people to perform at things that they've maybe never done before. So I think like the external factors, like if you manage people, it's really up to you to make sure that if the people working for you feel overwhelmed with self-doubt, that you're doing everything you can to A, support them, and B, not put them in positions that they can't handle yet.
Yeah, great point. And a question came in. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, but I'm going to give it a college try. I think Zhao Yu. And Zhao Yu, thank you so much for your question. She wants to know, hi from Toronto. And she says, is there an advantage to being an imposter? How can we use the feeling of imposter syndrome to our benefit? Do you have thoughts about that, Gabrielle?
Yeah, totally. I think that it's about reframing it. And I also think like imposters are outsiders, and outside perspective is so incredibly valuable to companies because you're bringing in a different perspective. And I think like that's great. And if you are noticing things that people on the inside aren't noticing, if you have the confidence to bring those things up, that is only a positive. And I also think, to the point I made earlier, if you can channel your imposter syndrome as a challenge to yourself to prove people wrong, to me, that has been the best way to deal with it. I feel like the times that I have felt judged by other people and like treated as though I don't deserve the job I've made it my mission to prove that I do belong and that I can do a good job. So I think it's just a matter of, you can't change your feelings, but you can change how you interpret them.
Yeah, amen to that. That's fantastic. And for those of you who are enjoying this conversation, you can learn more about Gabrielle and her fantastic new book, Everybody Else is Perfect, at Linktree. That's linktree.ee slash Gabrielle Korn events, and check out more there. And of course, get her book, which you can get on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and lots of real world places as well, provided they are open. So if you are also interested in tuning in every single Thursday, we have this amazing show sponsored by Newsweek. You can learn more and subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter, where you will get a weekly reminder about our fantastic guests at DorieClark.com/LinkedIn. So please feel free to type your questions into the chat box for Gabrielle. We have some words of affirmation here. Leah said, heck yes, we have to talk more openly about money. That's fantastic. And we also have a great note from Lisa, who wants to cheer you on, Gabrielle. She says, here's hoping that working the pandemic helps dispel the myth that anyone is perfect. We are all human. So amen to that. So Veronica actually had a question, Gabrielle, that I wanted to turn to. She wants to know, do you have thoughts about transparency in a job posting? It would certainly help the conversation. I'm assuming she means transparency about actually the salary. What do you think about that? Do you have any take or perspective on that?
I think transparency in job postings is great, but I think there's also the piece of it that like recruiters have to be flexible about salary too, because you don't want to alienate people from the job posting. You don't want to come in too low and have more senior people not apply because they think it's beneath them. And you don't want it too high because you don't want junior people who are really amazing to be afraid of it. So I think like a range would be appropriate. But in general, I always feel like more transparency, the better.
Yeah, makes sense. And Gina had another great question. Jean is a psychologist. She wants to know, pay transparency requires colleagues to think of ourselves as allies and not competitors. As a leader, a corporate leader yourself, Gabrielle, do you have thoughts about how to best build that culture of partnership? When you were running Nylon or in your work now at Netflix, what are the strategies that you use and that you would encourage others to use to think about building a collaborative and collegial environment?
I think it's so important to not pit people against each other. Like, there needs to be a competitive spirit externally, and that needs to be something that everybody works together to achieve. And I think, it's something that happens to women so often. Like, we are compared, we are compared to each other. We are like put above each other in weird ways. Like, I just think there's so much competition because the pie feels so small, because we all kind of operate from this like scarcity mindset of there are so few jobs, there's just so little money. And I think it's really a management problem to make people feel like, no, we work from a place of abundance. We are in this shared experience together. My work helps your work. And I think like it's so important for people to create close working relationships with their peers, not just for that job, but because those are the people that will help you for the rest of your career. Like, the people that I worked with at Refinery the first time I was there, because I was there twice in 2013, are still people who give me references and recommendations. Like, I think it's not just about what you get paid in that job, it's about the network you set up for the rest of your life.
Yeah, love that. Now, Gabrielle, obviously, because you came up in the fashion world, one of the sort of the oxygen surrounding your work and the context of your memoir is often around the question of appearance, and that is something not exclusively, but often much more heavily impacts women in the workplace. Can you share some thoughts about some of the pressures around appearance and how that manifests in the professional world these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to see what has happened in like our work remote world, because I think for the first time ever, there's been like so much less pressure on how you look. But I think in general, I found that people have a really hard time untangling how good you look versus how together you have it. And there's this assumption that like conventionally attractive people are more successful and smart and together. And like, for me, it was like the more I borrowed clothes and like the blonder and thinner I was, the more I felt like I was respected. And in fashion, it's so weird because it's like it is so aesthetically driven, and like you are encouraged to look in a certain way so that you are photographed going to events. And the more you're photographed, the more people see you and pay attention to you and reach out to you for things. And like it's all just kind of caught up in how you look. And it's so toxic. And I think it is ultimately a distraction from the work. And I think it keeps us focusing on things that don't matter. And I'm so happy to have spent the year in my pajamas, honestly.
Me too, absolutely. And of course, it's provided many more opportunities for things like cats to walk across our video screens, which is all to the good. So, Gabrielle, a question came in from Sheridan, who wants to know, amen to setting up a network that you use for life. Can you give us your thoughts on how to nurture that network over time? What do you do, and what advice would you give to others who want to cultivate their network over the long haul?
I think it has to be authentic. Like, I think thinking about it as something to be cultivated will hold you back, because your network should be people that you authentically care about, who authentically care about you, and you should want to stay in touch with them. And I think anything that is forced will seem forced, and it's so easy to like keep people in your life for when you need something from them. And I think people just, we all see right through that. We know when people reach out when they need something versus when they reach out because they care. So I think just picking people who you have a real connection with and focusing on like quality over quantity in the people in your life.
Yeah, that's a really powerful reminder. So, Gabrielle, of course, another theme that comes up in your book is being an out lesbian, and there's still, unfortunately, not that many out LGBT people, or especially women, at the highest echelons of media. How has that informed your experience, and what was that like for you, especially taking the reins of power at a young age?
I was the only one who had my title and was a lesbian. So it was very isolating. And I also felt like it really motivated me to use that power for good, because I felt like, okay, I have a seat at the table. I need to use that seat to make more seats for other people. And I think like we have so far to go in terms of representation and equality. And I think what I came up against a lot was people who wanted to believe that because I was me and I had my job, that meant equality had been achieved. And it was like, well, then why am I the only one? Like, if we've achieved that, it shouldn't be a big deal that I am the lesbian editor-in-chief of a fashion magazine. And but at the same time, like, I was also really aware of being a white woman in media. So like, I'm gay, but I also kind of looked exactly like everyone else in power. And that was uncomfortable. And it made me really want to your earlier question, like, pass the mic and help elevate other people. Period.
Yes, that sounds fantastic. Thank you for that. And a wonderful question came in from Kathy. She says, "You've done a lot at a very young age. How did you convince companies to give you a shot?" Now, this is not just at Nylon, where you became the editor at 29. I mean, you mentioned, of course, there's some factors of luck, and you'd been in digital, and digital was growing, but also you returned at a high level to work at Refinery 29. You're working at Netflix now. Over time, how could other people who are listening, who might be younger or might have non-traditional credentials, how can they best convince employers who might be skeptical to give them a shot?
You have to let your work speak for itself, I think. Like, I do have a successful track record of building brands and growing traffic, and luckily, I was able to do that in a short period of time, and so that's work that stands alone. And I also, like, I didn't tell people how old I was at Nylon. I let people project whatever assumptions they had onto me, and I was 26 when I started there, and just didn't tell people my age. And I found out later that they all assumed I was over 30 because of the way I carried myself, and because of like people's assumptions about like how old people who are competent are. So I think it's a few things. It's like not making your age a thing and then other people won't. I think it's about just doing a good job and letting the job you do inform the hiring decisions of other people.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gabrielle. And for folks who have been tuning in here, this is Gabrielle Korn. She is the author of the wonderful new book that came out on Tuesday, Everybody Else is Perfect. And Gabrielle talks in it about her experiences at the highest levels of the New York media world and what she has learned in the process. And we have been talking with her about the lessons that we can take from that experience. If you want to learn more about Gabrielle, you can use the following link to check out her upcoming events around her book. And if you want to make sure that you never miss an episode of the Newsweek Better program, you can actually go to DorieClark.com, sign up for my email list, and you will receive regular emails as well, so that you can stay tuned. We are here every Thursday at noon. Gabrielle, the final question I have to ask, you're launching a book in a pandemic. Your book actually was supposed to come out last year, but got booted because of the pandemic. So January 2021, obviously things will be fixed by then. But what has this experience been like for you? And what have you learned about, as a media veteran, what have you learned about media and how it has changed perhaps during the pandemic through launching your book in the midst of one?
It's completely surreal. It's like nothing about this is what I ever could have imagined on any level. But I think something that's really interesting about virtual events is that people from all over the world can tune in. And I think that especially publishing, feels so limited to big cities because that's where book events happen, because that's where the publishers are. And I think now that those events are online, it doesn't matter where you are. And what I'm hoping is that the same will turn out to be true for writers and authors. Like, you don't have to live in New York to be a journalist or an author, like, because we're all home anyway. So I think this has destabilized the media industry. And I think that ultimately that will turn out to be a good thing, because I don't think that media should ever be concentrated in one place.
Fantastic. Well, certainly the pandemic has spread things out and given a lot of opportunities for people to be able to connect from remote. You and I are both in New York City, albeit in different boroughs, but many of our guests that we've had on the Better Show have been from all around the world. We were mentioning earlier David Burkus, who lives in, I think it's actually literally Nebraska, who gave the wonderful TED Talk about salary and salary negotiation. So, Gabrielle, you are the author of the new book, Everybody Else is Perfect. So glad to have you here. Again, if you want to learn more about Gabrielle, here's the link where you can check her out. And thank you all for tuning in. And Gabrielle, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.